Well, Gareth, we know that the WBC have now ordered this fight between Tyson Fury and Dillian Whyte, but what does this actually mean?
Well, I mean, the big thing is the negotiation for this fight, James. An 80-20 or a 75-25 split, going up to 55-45, doesn't favour Dillian Whyte hugely in this. And, you know, if they can't do a negotiation, Eddie Hearn's already threatening, isn't he, that they'll go to purse bids and they won't accept it and it's going to be a buyout, basically. There's a lot of money behind him with DAZN, and there's a lot of money behind Tyson Fury with Bob Arum and ESPN and Frank Warren and BT Sports. So it could be a bit of a bidding war. It doesn't look like Whyte is going to accept 75-25. It doesn't look like he's going to accept 80-20. So we may end up in a stalemate. It may take a lot longer than we think to actually make this fight. And the WBC have not actually, according to Frank Warren, put a time scale on the negotiation. So we are in a little bit of a no man's land at the moment. But what does it mean if they fight? It's a great fight for Dillian Whyte. It's a massive opportunity that he's waited for 3 years while the fights between Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury have played out. You know, what does it mean for Tyson Fury? It's another guy he's got to face, as he says, as he always calls it, another bum in the shower. I think it's a good fight. It's an intriguing fight. And I think it's the biggest all-British clash we've had since Frank Bruno and Lennox Lewis, you know, nearly 2.5 decades ago. So we've got to look on it as a great fight. And I think, you know, Tyson Fury is going to have to get up for this because Dillian Whyte's going to be bringing everything he's got.
There was some talk over the last few weeks about a potential step-aside deal whereby AJ allows Tyson Fury to take on Alexander Usyk. With this fight between Whyte and Fury being ordered now by the WBC, does that put any talk of that unification fight to bed?
Well, it doesn't if this fight doesn't go ahead and they pull out of it, or it falls by the wayside, or this is heavyweight boxing, remember, and it's big bucks. So expect anything to happen. But you'd expect now that Joshua's going to take the second fight. You know, 40 million, 30 million as step aside money, huge amounts of money, totally unrealistic. I doubt very much whether they sat around the table and talked about that. I think it was just talk that was projected by the media, in my view. And I spoke to Bob Arum about this, actually, last Saturday afternoon before the Fight Night show. He couldn't come on and talk about it because he was there with Vasyl Lomachenko and Richard Comey. It was too noisy in Madison Square Garden. But my indications from him were that it was just talk in the media and the media putting it out there, that there hadn't actually been any real talks in real time that Joshua was going to step aside. It was all just suggestible and suggested ideas that could happen. I don't think he does want to step aside. I think he wants to take the opportunity to see if he can right the wrongs of that Tottenham Hotspur Stadium night on September the 25th, James, and get those 3 belts back and show what he really can do. There are dangers, because the more he opens up, the more opportunities for this very sneaky, clever ring general, Alexander Usyk. But I'm pleased he's going for it, and I wish him all the best. And I think he has got an opportunity to win those belts back, but he's got to be bullish, and he's got to have exactly the right tactics.
You spent a lot of time with Tyson Fury over the last week or so. You recorded an exclusive interview with him. What is his mindset at the moment? Do you think this fight against Dillian Whyte is one that he's interested in?
Well, on the one hand, he says, I don't care who I fight. If they put Barney Rubble in front of me, I'll Flintstone him. He says that on the one hand. He says that he'll fight all comers. But on the other hand, he says the 2 fights he most wanted were Alexander Usyk, because he's got 3 of the belts, WBA, IBF, and WBO, and Anthony Joshua, because he's got the name. But, you know, he's also got to face his mandatories as well. And Dillian Whyte's been ordered as mandatory. So that's the next step in the pattern that is there at the moment. You know, I think he leaves it up to his promoters, Frank Warren and Bob Arum, and they get the job done. I don't think, for his mental sanity, and I think a lot of fighters are like this, James, they let their promoters do the work for them. and then they just accept who they're going to fight. But I do think he's very keen on going into camp, early in the new year.
I think when you look at the heavyweight division at the moment, it is a bit of a minefield. It is a bit of a mess at times. But the question we're asking is, will we be able to get a fight next year for all the belts? Do you see it being realistic that we could have a unified heavyweight world champion next year?
Look, we all sat here through 2021, through this global pandemic, all delighted that we were going to get 2 fights between Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua for all the belts in 2021. One in Saudi in August, if you remember. Yeah. And then we were going to have another one, who knows, at Cardiff or wherever it was going to be afterwards. Or maybe it was going to be pushed later and it would go into 2022. Look what happened in June. Suddenly Deontay Wilder won his arbitration case and the whole landscape changed. And we've got a completely different landscape now. So these are enormous money fights. And when the enormous money fights are on the line, there's so much more jeopardy involved, with everyone getting a slice of the pie, from the fighters primarily, of course, to the promoters, to the broadcasters, and all the other people that are involved, the sponsors, the advertisers, all those betting agents, all those people. 2022, will we see an undisputed title fight? I'm going to say yes, but the UK, for those big fights, the window is really late April, I think, to late September for a big Wembley Arena event, a Wembley Stadium event. There's Cardiff, isn't there, for those colder periods with the roof. There's Saudi still in the mix. They've got this consortium. They're clearly keen on hosting an undisputed title fight. I think the relevance is they're looking to put themselves in the mix for the Olympics in 2032. They're looking to grow their stable of sports events, notwithstanding all the political stuff that goes alongside it and the outrage from the world. You'll always get that with them because of the nature of things that have gone on with the Saudis and globally. But hand on heart, let's say that if we get Fury and Whyte in March, and we get Alexander Usyk and Anthony Joshua in March, April, I think we will get one, because all the belts are going to be up for grabs. If Whyte beats Fury, he'll definitely want to fight for the undisputed title. If Fury wins, he'll definitely want to fight for the undisputed title. And so will the other two, against respectively whoever the winners are. So I do think in 2022, we will see an undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. But the caveat is, James, expect the unexpected.
And finally, I wanted to ask you about the other contenders, because you've got AJ, Usyk, Fury and Whyte all involved in huge world title fights, potentially at the start of 2022. But who do you think could have a big year and put themselves right in contention when it comes to potentially the end of 2022 or the beginning of the year after that?
Well, I'm looking at a list here, actually. I dragged up a list before we started speaking today. I know Deontay Wilder is saying that he may walk away from the sport, and Tyson Fury is saying, no, stay in the sport. Deontay Wilder against any of those guys? When I was with Fury the other day, he said, didn't you enjoy the last fight? What about a Fury Wilder 4 at some point? Derek Chisora, who I've been with recently, and obviously he's fighting this weekend, has said he wants his trilogy with Dillian and he wants his trilogy with Tyson. So Derek could be in the mix if he looks spectacular against Joseph Parker. And I think he might spring an upset. Joe Joyce is in the mix, of course. He's ranked number 3 with the WBC. He's 7 with the IBF and 2 with the WBO. Joseph Parker's way up there as well. There's a guy who looked very good against Afia Jegba on the undercard of Wilder Fury 3, and that's Frank Sanchez. He's not the biggest heavyweight in the world, but he's so skilled, and he showed that against Jegba, that he can fight against big punching heavyweights and be on his toes and be around the ring, and he's very, very clever fighter from Central America. So I think all those guys are in the mix. I'm looking at any others that might be there. You know, that's probably about it. Andy Ruiz is highly ranked still, but he's got to be in shape and he's got to prove himself, in my view. But and of the other ones that aren't really there yet, I see Tony Yoka having a big year in 2022. He's gone very quiet. Will he cling on to his Olympic gold from Rio, or will Joe Joyce end up getting that? But also there's Jared Anderson on the rise, who's not quite in those top 10s yet, but I think is going to be one of the stars of the future. If I was to pick one fighter at heavyweight who's going to do well in 2022, I'm going to go for Joe Joyce outside those other four.